the sphere of Malchus, because in the 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuos, so each week corresponds to another attribute, and so we're at the final attribute, which is the sphere of Malchus. So to understand a little bit what it is and how we can relate it. So generally, the sphere, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Nasa, Chayr, and Yesod, these are all emotions, how they relate to the person himself or herself, the way the person is expressing Chesed, which is an outward movement, or Gvura, which is restriction, and in that itself, there could be Netzach or Nahod. You can do it from a place of confidence or humility. So it's really the expressions of Chesed and Gvura through these spheres. What is Malchus? So Malchus is essentially the receiver. So you're giving Chesed, you're expressing yourself towards somebody. The person that's receiving it is Malchus. Okay? That's generally what Malchus is. Now I just want to think about it a little bit from a different perspective. There is, in the Sefirot, when we think about them in terms on a cosmic level, so the origin is the Ein Sof, is the infinite. The infinite is obviously colorless, imageless, and if it's infinite and it's one and it's unified, there's no perception, no perspective. Then we say that a person has an experience of, let's say, divine chesed, which means that you experience a certain experience in your life, and you say you're feeling it as chesed, you're feeling that God's kind to you. Or we look in the Torah itself, you look in the way the Torah is written, it speaks about God showing love, God being angry. These seem to be emotions. And if you think about the Ein Sof and you think about the unchangeable and the infinite, what does it actually mean that there's emotions, if there is possible to have an emotion? So the better way to understand it is that the light, the Ein Sof, is actually the same in Chesed, in Gvura, in Tiferes. It's the exact same thing. There's only one. But this particular one is expressed into different vessels. And the vessels are perceptions. So a person has a perception that they're seeing through the lens of Chesed, through kindness. So they're observing the light as kind. They're observing that God is kind to them. A person has the vessel of Gvura, so they're observing the vessel through the perception that there's actually restriction. But the truth is that the light in the vessel is the exact same thing in Chesed and in Gvura. It's the same light, and the only change is in the perception of the vessel. Okay, so this is the way we understand the Sefirot. Let's think about them in terms of, we're going to get very technical, but let's imagine in terms of colors. So if you say that the Ein Sof is one, so the best image for this one would be that it's clear, that it has no color. So imagine it's clear water. And then the perception becomes more rarefied, it becomes more tangible, it becomes more dimensional and visible. So what actually happens, another way of looking at it, is that the Sefirot, which is the lenses, are becoming more opaque. So it starts off with a clear glass, and then when it finally is projected into the slowest possible vessel, the vessel would appear to be a very dark blue or very dark black color. So it's the same light that exists in the higher, the same light exists in the lower. It's the perception is through the opaqueness of that lens, of that vessel, of that perception. But it's the exact same thing. So if we think about the Ein Sof as one, and then the expression of the divine, of Hashem in this world, expressed through Chesed, the Gvura, different attributes that's being expressed. The ultimate expression is what we call Malchus, the Shechina, that the Shechina's presence in this world. What is the Shechina's presence in the world? The Shechina's presence is called the feminine, or the divine feminine aspect. So what does it mean? It means the presence of what is in this present moment, whatever it is. So the Shekhinah's presence can be in exile, can be constricted, can be hidden, or it can be revealed. That really depends on our perception. But the Shekhinah's presence is the perception, the way it is perceived in the finite, in the tangible. And the Ein Sof, the perception of the infinite, would be something that's seen as the untangible, or the infinite, or the formless. I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say a person has an experience, a spiritual experience, or some type of deep experience, that they sense that their life makes sense, or it has some type of meaning, overarching meaning. Let's say one day you wake up and you think about your life and you say, okay, I'm this age, I'm this position, I'm doing this thing, why is everything working out this way? And you're uncertain. And you're uncertain about a lot of things. Why are these my parents, and why are these my siblings, and why are these my children, and nothing really makes sense, and why do I have this job? And nothing makes sense. Or maybe very few things make sense, but not a lot of things. And then one day, you just have an awareness that everything is actually perfect. I don't mean to say that you actually understand why everything is exactly how it is, but you get a certain sense that everything is interconnected and somehow it's supposed to make sense, and it's exactly the way it should be. Not a logical thing, not something that the left brain can wrap itself around, but just something that you have a certain awareness, certain intuition. It could be just a moment, it could be a fleeting moment, that you sense that everything in your life is perfect the way it should be, exactly the way it is. If a person has this type of experience, what they're really encountering is a reflection of the Shekhinah's presence in this world. The Shekhinah's presence is the Shaychen, the one that rests within creation, which means in the immediacy of creation. So in that experience, whatever you're having, if it's something that's immediate and it's tangible and it's felt as if it's the orchestration of your entire life, that's a Shekhinah's type of experience. This would be the most dense, if you wish, type of experience. The higher form of that experience would be experiencing the Ein Sof. Now it's very hard to experience the Ein Sof because by definition, if you're experiencing it, then it's not one anymore because there's a you that's perceiving it. So the best possible way to think about this would be when something pushes you to a certain perception that's beyond your perception. So let's say you think this is the way it should work out, or let's say a person is ill and you think that this is the way it should articulate, and then all of a sudden something shifts and something you cannot explain. It's unexplainable to you. Whatever you want to call it, let's say a medical miracle or something like that. Something that's undefinable, or at least you cannot define it. If you're having such an experience, what you're sensing is a little bit more the Ein Sof aspect, which means the infinite part. So one thing is more the immediacy, and one is more the transcendence. And these are the two extremes. When you're saying you're having an encounter, you can have an encounter of the immediacy of a God, the immediacy of Hashem's presence in your life, which is you feel your life is guided, and everything is orchestrated exactly the way it should be. That's the presence of the Shekhinah in your life. And this means if you just wake up in the morning, or you're walking down the street and everything just makes sense for one moment, and you feel like there is a guiding hand to all the things in your life, and everything somehow fits part of this greater puzzle, that's the presence of the Shekhinah, or the sensing of the presence of the Shekhinah in your own life. If you're having an experience that's completely transcendent of that, which is there's something way beyond my existence, something that's completely defies my logic, defies the way I can understand life, then you're getting a glimpse of the Ein Sof. But of course, that's the two extremes. So you have from the top to the bottom, of course, I don't want to mean this literally, but this is what you have from the top. And the bottom is that the higher one is less vessel, or the vessel is very clear, and the perception is very clear. There's less of you involved in the experience, so there's less of you experiencing it. It's more like a wow moment, and when you're overawed and you're completely overwhelmed, something that's beyond you, right? And what is really awe? Awe is really that sensation when you're overwhelmed with something that's larger than you, something it could be even painting or music or whatever that you're becoming overawed with, even though these are tangible and physical things and finite things. But if you become overawed at something, it means you're in the presence of something that you feel is much larger than you, much bigger than you. So in the height experience, which of the experience of the Ein Sof is really awe. And awe is yira. So yira, which translated as fear, but it really means awe. So yira, in a way, is higher than ava, which is love. Because a love experience is you're still present, feeling love. If you love, even if you love somebody, and you're completely committed to the other person in love, there's still a you that's in love. So there's still a perception, a perceiver. Awe is when you lose yourself completely into the other person. And the same thing also, there's a parallel to that with the same thing also we're talking about experience in the divine. If you're having an overawed experience, then it's more about the Ein Sof. It's less about you, but more about the experience. And you're completely overwhelmed. Wow, I don't know what just happened. Something amazing happened. That's a sensation that you're having more of the Ein Sof of the experience. And if you're having an experience that's very immediate and very direct and very guiding, and you feel very close and very intimate, that is more a love type of experience, and therefore there's still a you that's perceiving it. Okay, this is my life, this is all the details of my life, and this is the way all the details of my life are working out. So there are two different extremes. Now, of course, the ultimate is to have both, and the immediacy and the transcendence. Because if you're just functioning from the place of the immediacy and it becomes very personal and very close, then you lose the sense of the transcendence. If it's transcendence, then you lose the sense that it's actually immediate and accessible. If it becomes too accessible, then it becomes abusive. You abuse it. So this is like the balance, and this is the truth. This is a balance with all relationships. Every relationship, even though you would assume that a healthy relationship is based just on love, but the truth is that if it's just about love, then it's still about you. What do you have from the experience? I love this person, and that's the sensation that I have by being with this person. So ultimately it's about you. Now it could be you completely love this person and completely overwhelmed in love with this person, but still you feel good being in the presence of the other person. The moment you stop feeling that good, then the love becomes diminished, because it's always about you. If you have an element of awe, being overwhelmed, and even talking about physical relationships, interpersonal relationships between people, if you have a sense that you're overawed of that person's presence, and you're impressed or amazed and wowed by the person's way of thinking or way of being, whatever it is, or just being in the person's presence, then you're actually, there's a little bit less of you in the encounter, and therefore it creates that healthy balance. Of course, if you have just awe, it becomes reverence and becomes worship, and then it becomes an unequal relationship. So that's also not positive. You need the equalizer of love. But if you just have love, it's just about me, and there's no awe, it becomes pedestrian. It becomes just nothing of value. Because you have to always have, and even with your children, that even though your children you can love to the end of the world, you should have an element of awe, that you should be overwhelmed. I mean, your children, they come through you, but they're not part of you, and this is something that's amazing. So you have to look at them that way, the same thing as that you have love and you have awe. These are the two balanced emotions, which obviously goes back to what we talked about a few weeks ago, which is chesed and gvura, the balance of chesed and gvura. The chesed is expansive openness, connection, gvura is restriction, and the healthy balance is tiferes always, which is the balance of emotions. Chesed is I feel very close, I feel very imminent, and very immediate. And gvura is I feel overwhelmed in your might and your greatness, and tiferes is the balance. So all relationships has to have this balance between the extremes. It's between the Ein Sof element, which is yira, awe, over being overwhelmed in the presence of something that's much larger than you, and it's not about you, and the element of the immediate, which is the idea of malchus. So malchus, or malchut, is the immediate. This is why we call it. This is why it's referred to as the feminine. And the higher form, the higher and lower dynamic over here is the Ein Sof is more considered, or the Zaz, Arampin is considered more like the masculine. The reason for that is for the masculine. The feminine is that the feminine, and this really has nothing to do with male and females, but it's reflected in male and females, is that the feminine is something that's constantly changing. There's constantly movement in the body that actually changes. There's different cycles. The masculine is more steady, which is basically the same idea we're trying to say, that the Shekhinah's presence, which is the presence of the Shekhinah, the immediacy of the experience and how you're feeling about it and how you're perceiving it, is constantly fluctuating. Sometimes the Shekhinah is revealed to you. Sometimes the Shekhinah, which is the presence of Hashem, that's always present. But sometimes you're sensing it. Sometimes you're sensing it less. Sometimes it's more hidden. Sometimes it's more revealed. The presence of the Ein Sof is always present. There's no change. We change. Our perception changes, but the thing in itself never changes. And this is the difference. So here we have these two dynamics of the Ein Sof versus Malchus, or Zor Anpin, which is small face, versus Malchus, which is masculine and the feminine. And L'Shem Yichu Kutcher Brichu, the unity that we say whenever we do a mitzvah, we say it should be for the purpose of the unification. The unification is between the higher and the lower, which is between the masculine, or the Ein Sof, in comparison to Malchus, and Malchus, between the immediacy and the transcendence. And we need, again, that balance between feeling very imminent, but yet understanding a sense of awareness of the awe in the experience, and being in the awe of the experience and also sensing the immediacy of it. Because either one is in balance, and either one, like any type of relationship, any interpersonal relationship as well, if you have just immediacy, it's no good, and if you just have transcendence and sense of awe, it's no good. If you just have awe and no love, or love without awe, it's an unbalanced relationship. So we have these two extremes. If we want to look at them in terms of colors, so we say that the highest, which means the one that's unchangeable and always the same and a constant, would be the Ein Sof, which is always the same, which would be colorless. And Malchus would be the most colorful, or the deepest color. It wouldn't be black, because if it would be black, again, this is not literal. If it would be black, there would be no penetrating of any light, so it's completely opaque. It's just a vessel, there's no light. It has to be some type of darkness, some type of black that has a little, that's penetrating of some light. The color of that, the color of Malchus, would be very dark blue. And again, this is not that the color of Malchus actually, that Malchus really has a color, but the perception of the color of Malchus, the way we perceive it, would be something that we call like a night sky, of the color of the sky at night, which is a very, very dark blue. You sense that there's some light coming through, but it's pretty dark. This would be the presence of Malchus. And because we have Malchus, and the opposite side would be white, the opposite side would be clear. So this is why, for example, in tzitzis, we have the white strings and the blue strings, or the white part of the tzitzis and the stripes on the talus, which is black or blue. These are colors that represent these two extremes, that you're feeling yourself wrapped, surrounded by the transcendence, and then you're wrapping yourself around and you feel imminent, so you're being encloaked, which is the idea of makifim. That's the talus, that it's surrounding you, it's the surrounding light, it's transcendent, and then you're wrapping yourself around, you're making it a garment, which means that it's becoming intimate. So you have the same idea, it's becoming blue, it's entering into the state of Malchus. And this is the two extremes. As a meditative practice, there's one meditative practice which we have done a few times, which is the idea of becoming aware of the blue light, the Shekhinah's presence is above your head. We said it comes from Elazar Iskari, from the early Hasidim Rishonim, early pious ones, that they would meditate on the light that exists upon their head, because Malchus is always the lowest of the highest, therefore becomes the highest of the lowest, right? So the way it works is like this. Let's say if we say the 10 spheres are projected into our body, right? And we have, and everything really has the 10 spheres. So you have, let's say, the right arm is chesed, left hand is gvura, your torso is tiferes, your right leg is netzach, your left leg is hod. So where's your malchus? What's your malchus? Your malchus is the container, your entire body, right? Your whole body is the malchus that's contained. That's the sphere of the feminine, the receiver that receives all the 10 spherot. Okay, this is the self-contained image of the full parts of the full structure of the human being. But we say that Malchus is always the level of the presence of what is immediate, and then there's always going to be something that's higher than that, right? Mm-hmm. So from one perspective, the higher than that is the Ein Sof, right? It's always infinite to us until we achieve it. But in the moment we achieve it, it actually becomes Malchus, right? So this is the dynamic. Everything to us anything that's distant from us. We can use more a modern way of thinking about it. There's our being and there's our becoming, right? There's our being in the present moment, and then there's our becoming. Who are we tomorrow? We don't know yet, but this is our becoming. We're becoming someone tomorrow. Hopefully we're not the same being as we were today tomorrow, because we're constantly becoming. So becoming is your aspirations, your yearning, your desires, who you're going to become. That's your makifim. That's really your surrounding light. The person you become tomorrow, which is your being, that person has a higher level of becoming, which is the day after tomorrow. So what becomes your normative reality, what becomes who you are, which is your being, tomorrow, which was yesterday your becoming, tomorrow you have another further becoming. So this is the way it works. So let's say if we say the entire structure is Malchus, which is your being in the present, what is your becoming? That's the higher Malchus, which on one level, on one way of understanding, we can say it's the Ein Sof, because it's infinite. It's just your becoming. It's your potential. It's not yet who you are. But once you become that self, then there's going to be an Ein Sof even higher than that, right? And then the Ein Sof will become Malchus, and that Ein Sof will go higher. So the Malchus is the lower of the highest, but that becomes, for us, that's the highest of our lowest. That's our keter, that's our crown, that's our aspiration. The moment we become it, it's just the vessel, the lower of the higher. Then we reach the higher, and then we reach the higher. And that's constantly, we're constantly becoming. From our being, we're constantly becoming and growing. So if we have to map this out in terms of this in an image, and we have to imagine this as an image, if your being is who you are in the present, that's your panimi, that's your reality of right now. Your makif is what's surrounding you. Yeah, correct. Right, but it will use it's yeah, but it's infinite. But it's the other way, it's the other direction. So if your makifim is who you're surrounding, you become into your makifim. That's your panimi now. That's your internal, right? So if we say that your malchus, what's your malchus this present moment? Your malchus at this present moment is what you're projecting right now. That who are you being at this moment? What's your being? So you have your chesed, your gvura, teferes. These are all your emotions. Who's your being? I'm expressing myself this way and that way, and what's my personality? How am I being expressed? What's coming through me at this moment? That's my personal malchus at this moment. And every person's personal malchus is reflection and part of the greater malchus, right? The malchus of creation, of reality, of the being of reality in this present moment, is reflected to every single person's malchus of this present moment. Or in the language of Kabbalah, we are the Ivarei HaShechina, we're the limbs of the Shechina, which means that every person is one limb of the presence of the Shechina in creation. Your Shechina could be more revealing, one person's Shechina could be less revealing. Who's your being? Is your being revealing Hashem's presence in this world? If it is, then it's revealed part of the Shechina. If it's less revealed, then it's less revealed, right? So it really depends on our state, in our being. This is who we are in the present moment. So if the malchus is our being that's projected right now, who I am, where is the malchus that's above me? The malchus above me would be right above my head. Now, I don't mean this literally, but this would be my becoming. My becoming is my makifim, the place of my aspirations and my yearning and my desire, where I want to become. That's what I'm achieving tomorrow. That person that I'm going to achieve tomorrow hasn't yet been realized. Otherwise, it would be already tomorrow, right? It's going to be tomorrow. It's going to be in a moment from now. It's constantly becoming. The moment I become that malchus, then it's higher. But the malchus, that malchus itself, would be seen as my makifim, my surrounding. So there's one technique, one meditative technique, which is that you bring the malchus into your present. The malchus that's right above your head, you bring it into your present reality. Okay, that's one technique, which we've done in the past a few times. There's another way that this was done, is to reverse, which is more aligned with what we're trying to say. That because we're taking the two extremes, that the malchus is your being as it's present, and your Ein Sof, or your infinite potential, is your becoming, which is going to be is also your malchus from a certain perception once you become it. Right? When you aspire to it, it's still Ein Sof, it's still infinite, because you're not it yet. You're still who you are now. Tomorrow you'll become it. That will become your malchus. One way to move forward, at least conceptually, or on a spiritual level, is is to move forward in time before it actually occurs. So instead of thinking, okay, tomorrow I'm going to become this, and then the day after I'm going to become that, and the day after I'm going to become that, and constantly being, and hopefully I'm going to be better and better and better, and becoming, I'm going to express more of that. What happens if we do this in terms of an image, a mental image, that it's right on top of my head, that there's something right on top of my head, and that is going to be Malchus. And that's going to be a light. Just imagine as a beam of light. It's going to be a light that is the most opaque. Yeah, because you're not going to be able to see it. It's the Malchus, right? It's the Malchus of something that's higher. And as you travel up this light, it becomes more transparent and more transparent, right? Which means more infinite and more possibility, right? As it becomes more gentrified, it becomes more, with more color, it becomes more defined. The less color it has, the more potential it has. This is another way to think about the Ein Sof. What is the Ein Sof? The Ein Sof is really the possibility of all possibilities. That's what the Ein Sof is. What is the Sof? What is the fit? It is the concretized whatever it is. This is the table, and this is the table. But the table doesn't have to be the table. The table is just, this is the manifest of the unmanifest at this moment that is manifesting as this table. That's the Sof of the Ein Sof. But the Ein Sof can manifest table, can manifest chair, can manifest person or animal, whatever it desires at this present moment. But when I look at the table just as a table, I'm just seeing the form. I'm almost seeing it in its final color. But this comes from something that this is just the potential that was actually realized as this actual. But in the potential, it could have been a table, it could have been a chair. Right? This is another way of looking at the ayin and the yesh, right? That the yesh is the existence and the ayin is the nothingness that precedes existence. Everything comes from the ayin. The yesh is the way it is. If you can get into the ayin, you can create any yesh. So if you can do this conceptually, which is that you move from a point of view where you're in the malchus, of your present malchus, so you become very much aware of your body, and very much aware of yourself as it is, as you're projecting at this present moment. Who are you right now in your state of mind, in your emotional status, and everything that you are right this present moment? Who are you right this moment? And then you, instead of actually imagining your potential, because you can't, because then you would be it if you were to really imagine it, to move upwards vertically from Malchus, seen as a very opaque color, and to move slowly into a more clear and refined and transparent light. The light that you're moving into, or you're moving upwards, you're moving towards the Ein Sof. Of course, this is not literal. You're not actually moving to the Ein Sof. But what you're moving is to your truer potential, because that's your ultimate becoming, which is still infinite possibilities. Today you're this, tomorrow who knows what you're going to become. So you move upwards and you travel from Malchus into a state of the Ein Sof. Okay, we're gonna